Chapter 1. January 2017. Debbie White pulled over to the side of the road when her phone started ringing. She was finished with clients for the day and headed to her lonely home in Boise Bench. She'd purchased the house years before, right before her daughter Miranda had started school, because it was the best-ranked school system in the area. Her children had been her life for so long, she almost wasn't sure what to do without them. She grabbed her phone, noting the number was from Reston, Idaho, where her daughter lived. She swiped her finger across the screen and answered it. "Hello? Mrs. White, this is Wade Weston. I'm the manager of Rivers End Ranch. I was calling about the application you put in to be the director of our new child care center." Debbie blinked. She'd put the application in at the beginning of January and done the interview then. It had been 3 weeks. Surely this was a courtesy call to tell her she hadn't gotten the post. "Yes? We'd be happy to have you join our team as the director of our Kids Korral. We want the center to be up and running by the end of February, so we'd like you to start in a couple of weeks. Is that possible?" Debbie put her hand over her heart. She badly wanted to live near her daughter, but how could working with children possibly allow her to make enough to live? She'd given up her dream of working with kids when her own were small. The only reason she'd bothered to put in an application was because Miranda had insisted. "May I ask what the pay would be?" Wade named a figure that was higher than she had expected, but not nearly as much as she currently made. "Our staff cabin is currently empty, and you'd be welcome to rent it inexpensively." The figure he named had her eyes widening. As a real estate agent, she knew how much equity she had in her current home, and she knew how quickly it would sell. She closed her eyes and put all of her positive energy into her words. "I'll take it. I'm pleased to hear that, Mrs. White. How soon can you be on the ranch?" She calculated quickly. She could give a week's notice, then pack up her house every available moment while working with her current clients. Any that were left that refused to be referred to another agent, she could return for. "I can be there a week from Monday." It was only 10 days, but surely she could manage. "Is that soon enough?" "That sounds good to me. I'll make certain your cabin is ready for you. Please come to my office that morning, and we'll take care of all the paperwork. Welcome to the Rivers End team. I'll be there. Thanks so much." As she set the phone on the seat, she took deep, gulping breaths. What had she just agreed to do? She was going to be a daycare director again. It was the position she'd held when her husband had died, leaving her with 2 small children to raise on her own. It was a job she'd enjoyed more than any other. As she put her car in gear and slowly merged back into traffic, she smiled. She was moving to Rivers End Ranch, which was the most beautiful place in all of Idaho, all of the world. And she was going to be happy there. She could feel it. Asterisk. Debbie pulled onto the ranch 10 days later. She'd stayed one night at her daughter's house in Reston, but her car was full of all of the essentials. She'd decided that starting over meant just that, so she'd sold many of her possessions. There was a contract on the house where she'd raised her children, and her life was about to do a 180-degree turn. She stopped in front of the main house, where Miranda had told her Wade's office was, and hurried up to the building. Miranda and her husband Bob had left for work at 4 in the morning while Debbie was still sleeping. Miranda was the baker there on the ranch, and Bob was the cook in the small diner. Surprised at how nervous she was about starting a new job, she took deep breaths as she walked to the front desk. "I'm looking for Wade Weston. Are you Mrs. White?" The woman at the desk asked. "I am. It's so good to meet you." Miranda said her mom was coming. "Wade's waiting for you. He's ready to get the paperwork done and show you to the Kids Korral. We're all really excited to have you here. He can speak for himself." Wade looked bemused as he watched the 2 women talking. "Mrs. White. Come in. He held his office door open for her. Did you have trouble finding me? Debbie took the seat he gestured to, crossing one leg over the other. She'd opted not to wear one of her business suits she usually wore for work, and instead wore a pair of jeans, a button-up shirt, and a pair of cowboy boots. There was still quite a bit of snow on the ground, and she knew she'd need the jacket she'd left in the car. No trouble at all. Miranda and Bob told me just where you'd be. That's right, you're Miranda's mother. It's a good thing we don't worry about nepotism here. He steepled his fingers together and looked at her over them. What do you know about the ranch? She shrugged. Not a whole lot. I know that it's owned and run by the Weston siblings, and that there are 6 of you. You have fun Christmas traditions, and you employ a wonderful baker and a fabulous cook. Don't tell Bob he's fabulous, please. The man will never let anyone else forget it. Debbie smiled, recognizing the truth behind his words. Miranda tells him too often for him to ever forget it, I'm afraid. Wade groaned. We might need to muzzle your daughter. Debbie shrugged. Tell me about the Kids Korral. Wade smiled. Well, we've been talking about having a drop-in daycare on the ranch for years so our guests can participate in activities that aren't quite as family-friendly. We plan to open the daycare at 5 in the morning, and we'll close it at midnight. I know those are some long hours, but some of the ranch workers will be dropping their children off as they start their shifts. We also want there to be the opportunity for our guests to participate in some of our night activities. We may end up adjusting our hours as we go. Wade pushed a folder at her. If you'll get the paperwork signed, I'll take you over to the building we're using. It's actually one of the houses from our old west town, but we thought we'd convert it. The actual construction work is done, and now we're ready to get the teachers in there and the rooms set up. Sounds good to me. Debbie couldn't believe how excited she was at the opportunity. She quickly filled out the paperwork while Wade left the room for a moment. When she'd finished, he was back. Are you ready to see it? His eyes twinkled with excitement. He was obviously very proud of the child center they'd put together. I'd love to see it. As they left the main building, she noticed a man talking to the girl at the front desk. Yeah, I can do the helicopter tour today. I don't have any flights until tomorrow that I know of. The man was wearing a blue ball cap, and he seemed very laid back to Debbie. She didn't get to see his face, but there was something about his voice that made her stop for a moment before hurrying on after Wade. After seeing the Kids Korral and the small cabin she'd been assigned to live in for the time being, she walked over to Kelsey's cafe for lunch. She knew she'd get a good meal, because her son-in-law was the cook there. Wade had told her to take the day to settle in, and she could start setting up the center the following day. She couldn't believe how anxious she was to get started. There was one booth against the wall open, so she sank into it and looked around her. Kelsey, the youngest of the Weston siblings, was waddling around. She looked like she was about to collapse from the weight of her stomach, but she had a huge smile plastered to her face. She dropped a menu on the table. Welcome to the ranch, Mrs. White. Call me Debbie. Everyone around here is on a first-name basis. You can't leave me out of that. All right. I'm going to bring you some fried cheese curds, because Bob is pushing them today, and as his mother-in-law, you get no choice. What can I get you to drink? Iced tea would be great. Debbie looked down at her menu, struggling to decide. What's the special? She asked as Kelsey was starting to waddle away. Bob's going to be so glad you asked. Chicken and dumplings. He guarantees they will warm you from the inside out. Okay, I'll probably have that, but I'm going to look over the whole menu first. Debbie had been there several times with Miranda when she was visiting for Christmas, but she hadn't really taken the time to study what was there. She'd just gone by Miranda's suggestions. A minute later, Kelsey was back with her tea. We're out of tables, and Frank Watkins here is in a hurry. He's our pilot. Do you mind if he shares your table? Debbie was a little startled, but she shook her head. It wouldn't hurt her to share. No, that's fine. The man, who looked to be in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and a nicely trimmed beard, sat down across from her. Thanks for being willing to share. I have a flight in an hour, and that's enough time to eat if I don't have to wait for a table. I'm happy to share. Debbie couldn't remember the last time she'd sat alone at a table with a man who wasn't her son. She had carefully avoided men since her husband died 20 years before. I'm Debbie White. White, are you Miranda's mom? She nodded, used to being identified by her children. I am. Today's my first day working on the ranch. Welcome to River's End. You're going to love it here. I think we all feel like we're a big happy family. Frank took off his ball cap, running his fingers through his full head of hair. There were silver strands running through it, but he was an attractive man. How long have you worked here? 5 years. I'm retired Air Force. My husband was in the Air Force. Thank you for your service. The words were automatic, and she could now mention her husband without sadness. Why did I think you were single? Frank shook his head. Just my luck. All the pretty ladies my age are married. Where am I supposed to find a good woman? He sighed dramatically. Debbie shook her head. You misunderstand. My husband was killed in the line of duty when Miranda was 2. I'm sorry for your loss. Frank studied her. That's a long time ago. You never wanted to remarry? She shrugged. It never seemed right. I've had kids at home until the past couple of years, and it never seemed like the right time to divide my focus. I had to work hard to make a living for us, and the kids deserved every spare moment I had. Kids? How many? Frank eyed her slender figure. Most women his age had packed on at least a few pounds, especially the moms, and he couldn't help but be attracted to the pretty lady sitting across from him. Just 2. I was pregnant with my son when I lost my husband. She'd said the words a million times, and she waited for his talk about how tough it must have been. Well, you did a great job with Miranda, at least. I'm assuming your son isn't a drug dealer or murderer? Debbie laughed. I hope not. If he is, he hasn't gone to prison for it yet, and he's hiding it well. What more can you ask for in a kid? Oh, I can ask for a lot, but truly all I care about is them being happy. Miranda is so in love with Bob, it's kind of scary at times. Frank nodded. The ranch seems to spark that kind of love. I think it's something Bob's putting in the burgers. It wasn't quite like this before he got here around this time last year. Kelsey came back to the table, sliding a soft drink in front of Frank. What are you two getting? Debbie hadn't looked again, being absorbed in conversation instead. I'll have the chicken and dumplings. Frank shrugged. I'll take the same. And we're on one ticket. Debbie shook her head adamantly. No, I'll get my own. It's my welcome to the ranch meal. How do you know I don't do this for all the new ranch employees? She frowned. I don't, but I have a feeling you don't. Kelsey grinned. One ticket sounds good to me, and little Widget. Frank shook his head at her. Widget? You're starting to repeat yourself, Kelsey. It's time for a real name. She'll get a real name as soon as she's born. Shane and I are still in final negotiations. Kelsey turned to go put in their orders, leaving Debbie staring after her in bemusement. Widget? She asked. Frank sighed. She's used at least 100 different names for that baby since she announced her pregnancy last summer. I swear she's going to drive poor Shane absolutely bonkers before too terribly long. Too late. I'm there, a man in a sheriff's uniform called from the next table over. Frank raised a hand in greeting. Howdy, Sheriff. We're all on your side in the great baby naming debate of 2017. You'd better be. No one, and I repeat, no one wants that woman naming a baby. She's lost what bit of sanity she had before the pregnancy. I don't know what we're going to do with her. The sheriff nodded a greeting at Debbie. I think I saw you at the Christmas festivities. I'm Shane Clapper, the father of that poor baby who is going to end up with a name like Marble, just to amuse my crazy wife. Marble? Debbie asked, wrinkling her nose. She wouldn't really name the baby Marble, would she? She's been trying to get me to agree to Widget for months. Widget's a better name than Marble, Kelsey said, frowning at her husband. I never once suggested Marble as a name, and I wouldn't. I have standards, you know. She slipped 2 bowls of the special onto the table in front of Debbie and Frank. Please don't listen to my husband. He's apparently lost his marble. She walked away laughing at her own joke, obviously moving slowly. Debbie looked over at Shane. How much longer does she have to go? That baby is huge, and your wife is pretty small. Shane looked over at Kelsey, his eyes full of love. She's due in another month. I'm not sure she's going to make it that long, though. It might be good with as little as she is. I went 2 weeks early with both of mine, and my doctor said it was a blessing. I wasn't really large enough to carry a big baby. Debbie took a bite of her chicken and dumplings, and sighed contentedly. As annoying as Bob can be, his food is to die for. Frank nodded. I totally agree. His chicken and dumplings are one of my favorite things on the whole planet. What are your other favorite things? Debbie asked, growing fascinated by the man across from her. It was strange how the simple act of eating with a man suddenly seemed so intimate. Bob's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday specials, of course. His eyes were twinkling at her. I eat here at least 1 meal a day, but usually 2. You don't cook? She asked. Oh, I can cook. I just don't like to for only one person. It seems a waste of time to get out all those pots and pans when I'm the only one who's going to enjoy it. He took a sip of his drink, studying her over the rim. I don't suppose you'd let me cook you a welcome to the ranch supper, would you? Debbie bit her lip. I haven't gone out with a man since my husband Dale died. Then it sounds like it's time to me. I understand you closing yourself off from men while you were raising your kids, but they're grown now. Let me make you dinner. If you don't like it or me at the end of the night, then no harm done. If you do, maybe we can get to know one another better. He took his last bite of food and pushed his bowl to the middle of the table. I'd sure like the chance to get to know you. She considered for a moment. She'd come here to start anew, maybe going out with someone was just the right answer. I'd like that. When? Tonight. Where are you staying? Things were moving faster than Debbie would like, but she knew if she spent too much time thinking about it, she'd put the brakes on the whole thing. I'm in the staff cabin. I'll come get you at 6. Does that work? Debbie nodded. Yeah, I'll be ready at 6. And she would. She never went back on her word. She wasn't sure what her kids would think about it, but they were now grown, and it was time for her to start living her life for a change. Good. He leaned to one side as he pulled his wallet out of his back pocket and threw a 20 on the table. That'll cover lunch and a tip. I'll see you tonight. As Frank left the cafe, all he could think about was the pretty woman he'd just had lunch with. He'd seen her at Christmas time, sitting with Miranda and a young man, but he hadn't dared approach. When Kelsey had sat them together, it felt like fate was smiling down at him. Fate or Jacqueline's fairies. He was sure Jacqueline would claim it as a victory for the fairies. She always did. He hummed as he walked across the ranch toward the airstrip. Suddenly the prospect of flying a couple of spoiled 20-something boys around in his helicopter all afternoon didn't bother him. He was flying without his wings. He was going to knock her socks off. Debbie watched him go, wondering what she'd just agreed to. A date with a man she'd only just met? Dale had asked her out 6 times before she'd agreed, and she agreed to Frank after talking to him for 45 minutes? She didn't think she'd lost her mind, but she was sure acting a lot more wild and free than she usually did. She left the cafe and walked over toward the Old West town, stopping into the bakery to see Miranda. There was a short line, but at least it wasn't all the way out the door like it had been at Christmas time. When she reached the front of the line, Miranda smiled. "What can I get you, Mom?" "I want a chocolate chip cookie, but only if you put 12 chips in it and not 15. Miranda rolled her eyes. "You must have had lunch with Bob." Miranda and her husband had fought over the correct number of chocolate chips in a cookie for months before they started dating. Mostly because Bob was difficult. Debbie grinned. "I had lunch in the cafe, but Bob stayed in the kitchen where he belongs." "I had lunch with Frank." She hadn't meant to tell Miranda about her lunch, but the words just kind of popped out. "You did? What do you think of Frank?" Miranda's eyes were excited, though her face was pale. "Are you sick?" Debbie asked. "I'm fine." "What did you think of Frank?" "He seemed like a very nice man." "He's going to cook dinner for me tonight." Debbie studied her daughter's face, worried that it would bother her if she started dating. It had been so long for her. "Sounds good to me. I've heard he makes fabulous steaks." "What's he making for you?" "He was in a hurry, so I have no idea. I just know he's going to pick me up at my cabin at 6. "Your cabin?" Miranda smiled happily. "I'm so glad you're living and working on the ranch, Mom. And you're doing something you enjoy. You always hated being in real estate." "I did. But I was good at it, and I was able to raise you kids. That's what mattered at the time. Promise me that you'll be the one to matter now." Debbie smiled. "I was just telling myself that over lunch. I'm not living for you kids anymore. It's time to live for me." Miranda handed her the cookie and a bottle of water. "I'm glad." Chapter 2. Debbie spent the afternoon moving her things into the little cabin. It was only 1 bedroom, but it had a decent-sized kitchen and living area. It wasn't as big as the house where she'd raised her kids, but she didn't need a lot of space for just her. And like it or not, it was going to be just her now. The kids no longer came back during school breaks because they actually had lives. Hopefully there would be grandbabies soon, but she didn't really feel old enough to be a grandmother, and she had promised herself she would not turn into one of those women who hounded her children about having kids. When she'd finished getting everything set up the way she wanted it, she made the drive into Riston to get some groceries. Unlike Frank, she couldn't see herself eating 2 meals a day at the cafe. As much as she liked Bob's cooking, she liked to have her own space more, and having her own space meant cooking for herself. At 5:30, she started to get ready for her dinner. She didn't want to call it a date, because a date sounded so much more formal than what she expected to happen with Frank. He was a nice man, very attractive and easy to talk to. She didn't have any friends on the ranch yet, so why not spend time with him? She showered and fixed her hair, but she decided to stay casual for the evening, choosing to wear a pair of jeans and a lavender blouse. She couldn't imagine that Frank would dress up for dinner at his own house. When she was ready, she looked into the mirror. Her face showed the lines that came with being a single mother of 2, but only around her eyes. Her blonde hair was the same shade it had been at 20, and there were no signs of gray. She put on pale pink lipstick just as she heard the knock on her cabin door, and hurried over to open it. Frank was standing there, in formal and blue jeans and a button-up shirt, but he looked really good to her. "Hi." She stood staring at him, not sure what else to say. It had been much too long since she'd gone out with a man. What was she thinking? Frank grinned at her. Hi. Are you ready? She nodded. Just let me grab my purse. She hurried to the kitchen counter where she'd left it after her shopping trip, dropped her phone into it, and went back to the door. Let's go. Frank had seen the cabin 100 times in his years at the ranch, through several different occupants. Each person had made subtle changes, but all he could see from her was a small picture frame with her, Miranda, and a young man who must be her son. What's your boy's name? He asked, closing the door tightly and waiting while she locked. Scott. And he's a college student, right? He knew she'd mentioned him at lunch, but with the joking about him not being a drug dealer, he couldn't remember the real facts. Yeah. He's majoring in criminal justice. I think he'll be heading off for the military after graduation. He'll probably go into the Air Force to follow in his father's footsteps. He's doing it backward. Why not get the GI Bill working for him? She shrugged. Scott marches to the beat of his own drum. He's a good kid, but all the advice in the world isn't going to get him to change his mind once he's decided to do something. Frank led her to his pickup truck, parked in the driveway of the cabin. I'm not on property, but I'm close. Debbie nodded. That's fine. How long does it take to get there? 10 minutes. I'll point out some of the local sites on the way. As they drove, he showed her things on the ranch as they headed for the main road, and then he pointed out Kaya and Glenn's place. They're opening an equine therapy ranch for autistic kids. Well, Glenn is. Kaya's a romance writer. Really? I'd love to read something she's written. Will you write down her name for me before you drop me off? Happy to. I'm sure you can find her on Amazon. Do you have an e-reader? Of course. I may be old, but I live in this millennium. Old? Frank raised an eyebrow at her as they stopped at a four-way stop. Who told you you're old? I have a daughter who's married, and a son who's about to finish college. I'm old. Best-looking granny I've seen in a long time. He pulled off onto an unpaved road, driving back beyond trees to stop at a small cabin set back in the woods. It's not much, but it's home. It's beautiful. Debbie looked out at the small, rustic-looking cabin. Did you build it? No, but I did design it. It's not very big, but it works for me. He got out of the truck and walked up to unlock the door. I get snowed in here at times and have to salt my little road myself, but I like the seclusion. No one is bothering me here. Ever. Not even Bigfoot, she asked, remembering what her daughter had told her about Kelsey's obsession with Bigfoot. Only place I've seen Bigfoot recently was when the women of the ranch were planning Kelsey's baby shower. He opened the front door. You don't lock your door here? No one even knows my place is back here, unless they're friends. If I don't trust someone, I don't call them friend. So, nope, never lock up. Debbie was pleased with how neat his place was. She wasn't sure if it was because of his military training, or if he'd taken the time to clean up since they'd talked. The smell of the food cooking had her drawing a deep breath. That smells delicious. I threw the lasagna into the oven just before driving over to get you. I'm going to slip the garlic bread into the oven and toss the salad. Then supper will be ready. What would you like to drink? Water. She had no idea what he had to offer, but she preferred water over most anything anyway. How was your tour this afternoon? He shrugged. Couple of 20-something know-it-all kids. They were fine. At least I didn't crash this time. Crash? Have you crashed? He obviously hadn't been permanently injured, but that was scary. Just once. He sighed. I wasn't injured, but my passenger was. That's terrible. I can't imagine how I'd feel. Is the passenger all right now? Frank nodded, putting the bread into the oven. He absconded with the head maid and took her back to Oklahoma with him. He's a judge there. I'm glad he's all right. That must have been hard. It was. I felt a lot of guilt for a while, but he's better now. He served their salad into 2 bowls. I really hope you're hungry. I made enough to feed an army, which is why I don't cook much. I always overcook, and there's no one to eat leftovers. I'll happily take leftovers for my lunch tomorrow. There's lots to do to get the daycare up and running. Have you always worked with kids? She shook her head. No, but my degree is in early childhood education. My dream was to always work with kids, but when Dale died, I had to make more money. There's not exactly a fortune to be made as a preschool teacher. So I got my real estate license. I never loved the job, but it was an income that provided well for my kids and me. He handed her the 2 salad bowls and served lasagna onto plates, adding a piece of garlic bread to each. He got them each water while she put the plates on the table as well. So you're moving to the ranch to be near your daughter and going back to the life you love? I hope I'll love it as much as I remember loving it. It's been a long time. She took her seat across from him. Thank you for cooking tonight. It all looks delicious. Thank you for joining me. Even I get sick of eating at the restaurant every night. Though Thursdays and Fridays are fun. Trivia night and amateur night. He eyed her curiously. You don't happen to sing, do you? She shook her head. Only where there's a fussy baby in my arms. Why, do you sing? Sure. Loudly and off-key. I end up being a judge for amateur night a lot, because I love to listen. Sounds fun to me. She took a bite of the lasagna, expecting it to be merely mediocre, but the man really could cook. This is delicious. I told you I could cook. He pointed his fork at her. If amateur night sounds fun to you, then we should go this Friday. Debbie frowned. I don't know. If I go out with you twice in 1 week, will our names be forever linked together? Possibly, but I doubt it. No one's name is forever linked with Andrew's, and I think he's gone out with every single woman on the ranch at least once. Or maybe that's only once. I'll have to remember. She laughed. I think Miranda said she went out with him once, but there was no real chemistry or something. I think my daughter needs to have a man torment her for months and months before she'll consider dating him. Frank rolled his eyes. Bob's a mess, but he can cook like nobody's business. I think that's the only reason anyone other than Miranda puts up with him. She took a sip of her water, watching him over the top of it. It was very strange to have a date again after all those years. Bob's really a good guy. He's just odd, but I think that's what makes the ranch special. It's filled with odd people who work together to get along and create a unique place for the guests. He tilted his head to one side. Do you ski? She shook her head adamantly. I'm just not coordinated enough for skiing, I'm afraid. The few times I've tried it, I've ended up in a snowbank on the side of the bunny hill. I'm more of a sledder. She hadn't been in a lot of years, but she remembered some very fun times sledding when her kids were little. Really? I have this lovely little hill out behind my house. You could come over and go sledding on Saturday. Debbie was torn. Half of her really wanted to go sledding, because it had been years. The other half of her was wary of jumping headfirst into a relationship. I'm not sure. Frank sighed. Are you worried about what people would say? She shrugged. I'm not sure that I'm ready to be half a couple. I just got here, and I need to learn the ropes, figure out my new job. I don't think a relationship is a good idea just now. Let's be friends then. We can just do stuff together, so you have someone to hang out with. Miranda and Bob both work Saturdays. Besides, they're newlyweds. They don't want mom hanging around. You're right. Alright, let's go sledding on Saturday. But I'm bringing the refreshments. You're not going to get a complaint about that from me. I'm not stupid. What time? She asked. She wanted to have some time in the afternoon to explore Riston. Miranda and Bob lived there, but she knew little else about it. Besides, she wouldn't be able to stay in the staff cabin forever. Maybe there was a little house for sale that would suit her. We could do noon and stop at the cafe on the way out. How about 10, and we stop at the cafe on our way back? That would ensure they weren't out too terribly long. He shrugged. Sounds fine to me. I'll dig out my old sled. You don't have a toboggan, do you? I feel safer and more secure in a toboggan. His eyes narrowed. Sledding isn't about feeling secure. It's about having fun and letting gravity do its thing. Does that mean you don't have a toboggan? Debbie would go get her own toboggan if he couldn't provide one. He sighed. I think I do. Somewhere. But I want to let you know that I think it's the coward's way out. So you use a sled, and I'll use a toboggan. Simple. I'll race you. His eyes lit up at the idea. Really? I thought we were friends. It'll be a friendly race. I promise. Are you hyper-competitive? She asked, frowning at him. He shook his head. Oh no. Not at all. That might be why I'm not allowed to take part in trivia night anymore, but we're just not discussing that. Oh really? She raised an eyebrow at him. We're not? I think that's something we should discuss. Nope. I'll just ask Kelsey then. From what I can tell, she'll tell me what I want to know. Frank grumbled under his breath. She probably would. She'll tell anyone anything. Really? No, not really. She won't tell any of her siblings' secrets, but she would probably tell mine. He shook his head. The Weston family is very tight-knit. When you see them, and how very different they are, it'll surprise you, but it's true. Even the two girls are extremely close, no matter how different they look. Aren't they twins? They are, but Kelsey's very girly, and she keeps her hair blonde and she wears dresses and makeup. Danny is more rough and tumble, I guess is the way to put it. That makes sense. She saw that he was finished eating, so she gathered the empty plates from the table and carried them to the sink. Supper was wonderful. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad you came. He got the empty glasses. Did you get enough? I made key lime cheesecake for dessert. Debbie's eyes widened. I couldn't eat another bite at the moment, but that sounds amazing. He dug through a cabinet for a throwaway plastic bowl and cut her a slice, putting it into the bowl and sealing it. Now you can have it whenever you want. You're a good guy, aren't you, Frank? Frank shrugged. Those words have been applied to me once or twice. Then I'm glad I get to go sledding with you on Saturday. It's supposed to be warm tomorrow. I hope all the snow doesn't melt on us. It won't. It's only supposed to get up to 30. It'll be great sledding weather on Saturday. I'll dig out my old sled and find the toboggan, although I still think you're playing it too safe. You've never seen me ride one, though. I can tip over on anything, including one of those discs kids sled down hills on. I'm not risking it. Fine. But you're bringing the snack, remember? I do remember. I'll be waiting with it. She efficiently loaded his dishwasher, rearranging several things that were already in there. Why do women do that? He asked, puzzled. Do what? Move stuff around in a dishwasher? Why is where a man puts it never good enough? She shrugged. There's a right way to load a dishwasher and a wrong way. I make sure it's the right way before I run it. It's that simple. Does Miranda load the dishwasher the right way? Of course. I taught her to do it from the time she was small. What about Scott? She wrinkled her nose. Scott refused to learn properly, doing it wrong every single time, until I refused to let him near my dishwasher ever again. He laughed. He did it wrong because he's a man, right? She shook her head slowly. No, he did it wrong because he refused to learn to do it right. It was his choice. But is there really a right? Or is right just something women make up in their heads so they can tell men they did it wrong? There's really a right. Dishes don't come clean the way you had it. Do you constantly have to rerun the dishwasher because dishes aren't clean? Well, yeah, but that's just because dishwashers aren't as good as hand washing. I don't think a machine ever could be. Frank shrugged. He knew he was getting her goat, but it was kind of fun. He liked her. A lot. Sure, he'd agreed to just be friends, but that was only because he wanted to have a chance with her. He was going to push for more the second he sensed she was ready for it. Typical male logic. She finished reloading the dishwasher properly and added soap. It's not all the way full, he protested. If I cram more dishes in there, they'll never get clean. Do you want a lot of dishes to not get clean or a few dishes to get clean? He glared at her. I'm not even going there. Okay. You don't have to. She closed the dishwasher and ran it. She wasn't sure what he wanted to do now. Would he take her home? So do you want to hang out for a little while? We could play a game? Or I could take you right home so you can get ready for work tomorrow. She frowned. I should probably go straight home. I have a lot to do to get ready. All right. Maybe we can have lunch tomorrow? She took her cheesecake from the counter where he'd left it. As friends, right? Definitely as friends. I wouldn't ask for more. She shrugged into her coat and headed for the door, moving the cheesecake from hand to hand. She wasn't going to risk that. Sure. Let's do lunch. She didn't particularly relish the idea of doing everything alone, and here was a kind man offering his friendship. She needed to accept. Frank smiled as he started his truck. I'll meet you at Kelsey's Cave at noon. If you get there first, get me the special. What if you don't want the special? Debbie asked. Trust me, I want the special. So do you for that matter. Bob's special is always worth eating. Always. All right. If I'm there first, I'll order 2 specials. Debbie figured he knew what he was talking about since he was so adamant about it. You won't regret it. He pulled up in front of her cabin and stopped the truck. He put his hand on his handle as if he was going to walk her to the door. Don't. It would seem like a date if you walked me to the door. Friends don't do that for each other. Frank nodded, staying in the truck. He wanted a real relationship from her, but he'd wait until she seemed ready for it. In the meantime, friendship would have to do. Sleep well. See you at noon. Good night. She got down out of the truck and hurried to the door, unlocked it, and went inside. As she leaned back against the door, she thought back over the evening. Frank was something else. She didn't know him well, yet, but she had a feeling when she did, she wasn't going to be able to keep her heart intact. No man had treated her so kindly since Dale had died. She hadn't allowed them to. Now that she'd given Frank a bit of an in, would he think there would be more to their relationship than she was ready for? He'd agreed they'd just be friends, but could he stick to that? He wanted more. She could tell. She just didn't think she could handle it quite yet. She had to be friends for a while before she could move into more than friendship. It had been too long. She'd had one love in her life, and only one. When he died, a little piece of her had died with him. How could she even entertain the thought of dating again? It wasn't time yet. It couldn't be. She walked back to her room and picked up her e-reader, searching for the name Frank had given her. She'd read a book or two by Kaya Taylor. Maybe she would distract her from her own issues. There was nothing like losing yourself in a good love story to forget all your troubles and become a brand new person. Yes, that was exactly what she needed. As she searched through the titles, she thought of nothing but Frank and the evening they'd just had. Maybe it was too late and a piece of her heart was already his? She sighed. She had to harden her heart. It wasn't time yet. It seemed like Dale had just died yesterday, leaving her alone, pregnant and with a 2-year-old. She couldn't go through anything like that again. Her heart couldn't handle it. Chapter 3. Debbie spent the next morning making a list of things she'd need for the Kids Korral. The building seemed to be in perfect order to her, though she wanted some of the doors removed and replaced with half doors so sounds could be shut out when necessary. She'd have to get in touch with Maury at Pulaski Construction, Incorporated. He was the person in charge of the renovations. Her list would need to be turned into Danny Weston, but she could work with the budget that was provided to her. Tiny little stackable cribs were ordered. Debbie didn't let herself think about them too much, because to her they resembled cages, but they were the best way to have sleeping areas for multiple babies in one room. She worked quickly, going from room to room. She ordered a buggy that would fit 6 infants and a table that would fit 6. For the toddlers she ordered stacking toys and learning toys, even a couple of DVDs designed to aid the children in learning to read. She knew that most parents would be dropping their children there as a way to have some freedom, but she was determined to teach them. For the 2- and 3-year-olds, she ordered books, dolls, dishes, and toy trucks. The 4-year-olds got more learning activities, including letters and numbers they would learn to use on a whiteboard. For the school-aged children, she ordered games and creative play activities, including puppets and a puppet stage. The children would learn how to entertain themselves quickly. Most children wouldn't be there for more than a week or 2 at a time, so they'd have no time to become bored with the activities offered to them. Debbie liked the idea of having a few children who belonged to the ranch staff, but having a large group of rotating children as well. It would be nice to constantly face new challenges. There would be no way to grow stagnant. By the time she needed to leave to walk over to Kelsey's cave for lunch, her list was done, and she'd talked to the construction company about making sure the doors were made to her specifications. She headed out and walked the path from the Old West town toward the cafe, pleased with all that she'd accomplished. Frank wasn't there yet, so she took a seat, and when Kelsey waddled over to her, she gave her and Frank's order. "Are you two going to be eating together every day?" Kelsey asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Debbie blushed, feeling like an idiot. She had 2 grown children, so she should be long past the blushing stage. "We're friends. I'm not sure how often we'll eat together, but he's kindly providing me with company since I don't know anyone." "And that's all it is?" Kelsey asked, one eyebrow raised. Debbie nodded, refusing to take the bait. "It is." "How are you feeling?" At the question, Kelsey slid into the booth across from Debbie. "Can I be frank?" "Well, Frank is Frank. But I suppose you can be forthright. I feel like the only thing keeping me together is static cling. I ache in every muscle of my body." Kelsey patted her belly affectionately. "If little Begonia is this much of a pain when she's born, I'm going to give her to Danny to raise." "Why Danny?" Debbie asked, a grin on her face. "Because of the twin code. She has to take her and raise her as her own. The others could shove her off on each other, but Danny has to keep her." "I wasn't aware the twin code said that." "Oh, I scribbled it in with crayon just last week." Kelsey propped her feet up beside Debbie. "I promise I'll get up as soon as Frank is here, but for the moment, I can say you looked lonely. Is your mom going to be here when the baby is born?" Debbie asked, eyeing Kelsey's huge stomach. You look like you could pop any minute. I feel like I could too. Kelsey sighed dramatically. Mom and Dad promised to be here, but what if I go into labor early? Then who's going to sponge my forehead and tell me when to breathe? Isn't that Shane's job? Debbie asked. He's not planning to be there? Most husbands were in the room when babies were born. Oh, sure, he'll be there. He'll be passed out cold on the floor, but he'll be there. Kelsey shook her head. No, I need a mother figure there. What about Jacqueline? I've heard stories about her. Kelsey nodded. I love Jacqueline. I do. But she's never had a baby. She's never married or been the giver of life. I need a mom. Someone who's been there. She leaned forward, looking to see if anyone was listening, as if she was imparting a great secret. So this is what I need. If my mom doesn't arrive, you have to be my fake mom while I'm in labor. Debbie's eyes widened. No, your mom will be here. You won't need me. But if I do? Kelsey reached out and grabbed Debbie's hand, a desperate look on her face. Please tell me you'll be there if my mom can't. Debbie took a deep breath, astounded by how beautiful Kelsey's ice blue eyes were. She knew all the Westons had the same eyes, but there was something almost magical in Kelsey's, pulling her in. I'll do it, but only if your mom can't. That's all I ask. Kelsey got to her feet. I'll get your drinks. She hurried away as if nothing had happened, and Debbie felt as if her world had just tilted on its axis. Frank slid into the booth, looking after Kelsey. What's up with her? Debbie sighed. She wants me to be there when the baby's born if her mom can't make it. What do I know about helping someone have a baby? The very idea petrified her, but if it would make Kelsey calmer as she waited for her baby to arrive, then she'd agree. Frank shrugged. I don't know. What did you tell her? She groaned, running her fingers through her hair, even though she knew she was musing it horribly. I told her yes. There's something mesmerizing about her eyes. He laughed. I figured she'd get you. That girl. There's something awfully special about her, about the whole family, really. Now that they're all paired up, I'm not sure how things are going to be around here. River's End won't be the same without Jacqueline working to match up the Westons. She'll still match other people up though, right? I know Miranda said she nudged her and Bob together. Frank laughed. She did more than that. She wrapped all of Bob's Secret Santa gifts for Miranda. I don't think Miranda ever figured out that she was the one wrapping them, either. Debbie smiled. That was really sweet of her. Oh yeah. A real sweetheart, that's Jacqueline. Kelsey set their drinks on the table in front of them. I'll be back in a minute with 2 specials. What is the special today? Debbie asked. She had ordered a meal, having no idea what she was getting. She'd never done that before. Kelsey laughed. Today's special is Bob's Barbecue Bacon Cheeseburger. It's served with an onion ring right on the burger. Trust me, you do not want to miss this. And of course it's served with onion rings. Bob says it's so good it'll make me want to slap my mama, but I would never slap my mama. Now that I'm going to be a mama, I have a lot more respect for what mine went through to bring me to this earth. With those words she waddled away. Debbie noted that she was moving much faster than she had earlier. It was as if she was no longer hurting nearly as much now that she'd talked Debbie into being there. Frank grinned, shaking his head. That girl has serious issues. Yes, she does. I never know what's going to come out of her mouth next. Does she seem more predictable after you've known her for a while? He laughed out loud, a booming laugh that seemed to fill the cafe with merriment. Nothing she could do would surprise me at this point, but only because I've learned to expect the unexpected. Does that make sense? I guess it does. I just wish I could figure her out. You, me, and the rest of Riston. Frank nodded to where the sheriff had just walked in. And poor Sheriff Shane. Can you imagine being married to her? Debbie shook her head. I can't imagine trying to live with her at all. She told me she's going to name the baby Begonia. What kind of name is Begonia? Oh, don't worry, it'll be something else tomorrow. Like Widget. That's become a favorite. It's the only name I know of that she circled back to. Every day, it's something new. What does Shane say to that? Oh, the sheriff likes the name Victoria. He says that will be the baby's name if he has to hogtie his wife. We'll see who wins. There's a poll going on the baby's name, and Shane's odds for getting a Victoria are not very good at all. Debbie bit her lip, stifling a laugh. Poor Shane. I don't know about that. He's married to the woman he's loved for years. As soon as he heard she'd broken up with her boyfriend, he was here and asking her out. It was a whirlwind romance, but we were all pleased for him. He was always a good, happy man. Now there's a level of satisfaction with life no one ever thought they'd see in him. Of course, it's tempered with utter bafflement all the time, so you never know which is going to win out. Frank nodded at the sheriff who was heading for his wife. Kelsey, I told you to sit in the back and work on your paperwork today. You're too tired to be out here waiting tables. Your feet have swollen to twice their normal size. Shane shook his head at Kelsey, an exasperated look on his face. Instead, I sent Joni to the back to do the paperwork. I'll stick my feet in snow, and the cold will help the swelling. Kelsey patted Shane's cheek absently. Shane sighed. Why can't you ever do anything the easy way? You have got to be the most stubborn female this side of the Rocky Mountains. You wouldn't love me any other way. Kelsey stood on tiptoe to kiss her husband. You know it's getting harder and harder to kiss you. Little Begonia is in the way all the time. Victoria. Fine. Begonia Victoria. I'm going to go sit down. I need lunch. Shane wandered over to one of the booths. Why doesn't he sit at the counter? Debbie asked, having enjoyed the display between the soon-to-be parents as much as everyone else in the cafe had. He always sits in that same booth. Sometimes his men join him, but usually it's just him. I'm not sure why, but I know there's where he sat every day for the past 5 years. Once when he didn't show up, Kelsey took a meal to him, because she was sure he was dying or something. Before they were dating? Debbie asked. Yeah. She was still dating someone else. Frank shook his head. He knew he loved her years ago, and I think deep down, she knew she loved him. They were made for each other. Obviously, Debbie said softly. It was the kind of love she'd shared with Dale. For the short while she'd had him in her life, anyway. They'd only known one another a few months before they married, and then Miranda had come 10 months after the wedding. Everything about their lives together had been whirlwind. Sometimes she wondered if she really missed him or if she missed being in a relationship. Kelsey slid their food onto the table in front of them, and Frank smiled, rubbing his hands together. I love his burger specials. You love everything Bob makes. I'd tell him, but he can barely fit his big head in the kitchen as it is. Kelsey all but shouted the insult, obviously wanting Bob to hear it. My head is as big as it should be. I'm the best chef this little cafe has ever seen, and I won't be ashamed of that fact. Bob spotted Debbie, raising his hand in a wave. And don't try to insult me around my new mother-in-law. What are you thinking? Kelsey rolled her eyes. Is he like this at home too? Fortunately, I've only been around a few times when they were there, but yeah, I'd say he's like that at home, too. Debbie picked up her burger and took a big bite. She chewed slowly, savoring the blend of flavors. He has good reason to be. This is a good burger. Enjoy. Holler if you need anything else. I'll be harassing my husband." With that, the waitress strolled over to her husband's booth and slid in across from him. "My feet hurt. Will you rub them?" Shane's deep voice carried. "I shouldn't, because you were supposed to sit and do paperwork today. But you love me and little Begonia, so you will?" "Of course I will. I don't know why I didn't fall for Danny though. She's at least halfway sane." "Don't insult my sister that way," Kelsey demanded. Debbie laughed, shaking her head. "It's not very busy today. I wonder why." "It will be." At Frank's words, the bell over the front door rang and suddenly every booth was full. "How?" Debbie asked, her eyes wide. "Most of them are guests. There was a sleigh ride this morning, and they just finished." "Do you know everything that goes on around here?" Debbie asked. He shrugged. "Mostly. I have a helicopter tour this afternoon." "Do you prefer flying a plane or a helicopter?" she asked, taking another big bite of her burger. "Helicopter is more fun," he said. "I can see what's going on around me better. The planes are to get people from point A to point B. The choppers are to check out the ground around you. Lots more fun. I'll have to have you take me up one of these days. I've never been in a helicopter, and I'd love to see the ranch that way." "What are you doing Sunday?" he asked. "Going to church and having lunch with my daughter and her husband." He shrugged. "Another time then. You'll love it. There's no better way to see everything on the ranch." He was disappointed that she didn't want to go right away, but he didn't let it show. He'd agreed to friendship, and he wasn't going to push it in a way that made her feel uncomfortable. "What do you usually do on Sundays?" she asked. "I usually go to church either here on the ranch or in Riston. When Pastor Kevin first arrived, he didn't have service every weekend. But he started to, and we all like that. It's nice to see the little church in the old West Town in use for a real church service." "Do you ever fly guests on weekends?" "All the time. I don't have any scheduled for this weekend yet, but it could happen. Some of our more affluent guests have me fly them from the airport in Lewiston." Frank took a bite of an onion ring. "I don't mind the flights. I like to keep busy." "Your place must take a lot of work." He shrugged. "Not really. I chop my own wood, but that's not a difficult task. I have to deal with snow at times. I cut my own grass, but there's always at least one day off during the week." "Well, there wasn't at Christmas time, but there usually is." "What do you have going this afternoon?" "A newlywed couple wants to see the area from the helicopter. They booked me for a 2-hour tour." "As opposed to a 3-hour tour? You could get shipwrecked." Frank shook his head at her. "Sounds like a mom joke." "I am a mom," Debbie said with a laugh. "What are you doing for supper tonight? Do you want to go to the restaurant with me? There's usually a live band on Tuesdays." She thought about it for a minute but finally shook her head. "I don't want to get used to other people cooking for me. I need to be able to keep doing for myself." She'd always cooked at least one meal a day, and she wasn't going to slip into his bad habits. "Okay." He wasn't going to press her. "Do you want to come over to the cabin for supper? I can cook, you know." Frank was a bit surprised at her offer, but he immediately nodded. "I'd like that a lot." "Okay. I'll have it ready around 6. She wasn't quite sure why she'd asked him over, but she couldn't take it back now. It would certainly give him the wrong idea. "What are your plans for the afternoon?" he asked. "I have 4 interviews scheduled for teachers today. They've made it through the ranch's screening process, and now I need to talk to them, see what I think. I'd love to have my teaching staff scheduled before the middle of February. Then we'd have 2 weeks to get everything in order before our official open." "Is there a lot to do once you have teachers in place?" She shrugged. I need to approve lesson plans. I want all the teachers to go through first aid and CPR training. I like to know that we're always prepared. When I was teaching 3-year-olds many, many years ago, one of the girls was eating so quickly that she started to choke on a French fry. I had to use the Heimlich on her, and I was so thankful that I'd learned it. There's a different way to do it for children and infants, so I want to be sure all the teachers know each type. Lesson plans? For 2-year-olds? She nodded emphatically. Sure. It's a little hard, because we won't know what children will have from one week to the next, but we'll be prepared regardless. None of my teachers will be sitting their kids down for movies all day every day. One day a week for a couple of hours is a maybe. Do some teachers do that? He asked, surprised. She nodded, glancing at the time on her phone. I have an interview in 10 minutes. She opened her wallet and pulled out a 20, pushing it toward him. I'm paying today. Frank looked at her money with surprise. I can't let you pay for me. Debbie got to her feet, shaking her head. You paid for me yesterday. My turn today. Okay. He thought she was taking the friendship thing a little too far, but he wasn't going to argue too much. He'd find a way to slip it back into her purse later. Or drop it somewhere in her house. It wasn't like he'd really let her pay for his lunch, or hers for that matter. She hurried out of the diner, waving at Kelsey, who was pouring coffee for a couple of the ranch's guests, obviously keeping them entertained with her stories of Bigfoot. She got back to the Kids Korral just as a car was pulling up. It was her first interview, and she'd almost been late. Frank was taking up an awful lot of her time. She wasn't sure if that should make her happy or scare her. She needed to focus on her job and her family. She sighed as she opened the door for the young woman who was interviewing with her. There was no need to concentrate on her family. Her kids were grown. I'm Debbie. I'm the director here. Do you live in the area? She asked as she led the way into her office. There was a file on her desk with her interviewees in order. She'd know this woman's name in a flash. No, I'm from Lewiston. My family came here every summer as I was growing up. I love this place, and it was always my dream to one day work here. I didn't think that was possible with a degree in early childhood, so I'm thrilled the Kids Korral is opening. Debbie sat down at her desk and peeked at the top folder. Tell me, Michaela, what age group would you prefer? Chapter 4. Debbie found the first of her teachers before hurrying back to her cabin. She couldn't think of it as home yet, to cook supper. What had she been thinking to invite Frank over with no firm plans for what to cook? And it was lazy love night. She wondered if he watched for a moment, then shook her head. Of course, he didn't watch. Not a lot of men did, but she was a huge fan. She looked in her fridge to try to decide what to cook for them, not knowing his tastes well. Other than loving everything Bob had ever cooked, but how was she supposed to make that work for dinner? She pulled a packet of ground beef from the fridge and threw the meat into a bowl, adding finely ground crackers and a bit of egg. She would make Swedish meatballs over noodles, along with soup and salad. It was quick and easy, and something her children had always enjoyed. Once the meatballs were in the oven, she set the table and made the salad, watching the clock as she worked quickly. She'd expected to leave work 30 minutes earlier than she had, and the time crunch was making her a bit nervous. Though why she'd be nervous about cooking for a friend, she didn't know. She hurried to the living room and set Lazy Love to DVR, just in case they weren't done by the time it came on. She refused to miss a single episode. Joanne should be having her baby any week, and she was not going to miss it. She was just pulling the meatballs from the oven when the knock sounded at the front door. She called out loudly, "Come in," as she dropped them into the sauce she'd already prepared. Frank stepped in, removing his ball cap. It was a different cap than he'd worn at lunch. "Exactly how many ball caps do you have?" she asked. 783. She looked at him for a moment, blinking rapidly. Did you make that number up? He shook his head. Nope. I collect ball caps, and I did an inventory of how many I had a few months ago. I'm still missing a few states. Repeat visitors tend to bring me caps from their state, so I've got most of them. I still need Hawaii, North Carolina, Vermont, Maine, and Rhode Island. Debbie grinned. If I make it to any of those states, I'll grab you a ball cap. I'd appreciate it. He hoped she wouldn't be doing any traveling without him, but if she was going to be nervous about their relationship, then he wasn't going to say that out loud. Where's your son going to school? He's in Moscow at the University of Idaho. He loves it there. So you're closer to him now, too. Yeah, I am. She handed him the salad to set on the table. I hope you're hungry. Definitely. I haven't eaten since lunch. Was in the chopper all day. Debbie put the water glasses on the table, leaving the meatballs and the sauce simmering on the stove. We can go ahead and start with the soup and salad. Sounds good. You went all out. She shook her head. Not really. Just threw together one of my kids' favorite meals. Seemed simplest. I ended up working a little later than I'd planned, so I needed something easy. She eyed him for a moment. You don't happen to watch Lazy Love, do you? That show Kelsey's always going on about? Yeah, that one. Debbie grinned, knowing she now had something fun to talk to Kelsey about other than the baby. I haven't seen it. It's a soap opera, isn't it? Not at all. It's just a nighttime drama. About a ranch in Texas. You watch it? Frank asked. She nodded. Every week. I have it set up to DVR tonight, so I can miss it and watch it later if I need to. He sighed. You want me to watch that show with you, don't you? It'll give you and Kelsey something else to talk about. He shook his head. Fine. I'll watch Lazy Love. Why do they call it that anyway? The name of the ranch is the Lazy something or other. I can never remember. What's so dramatic about a ranch anyway? Debbie grinned at him. Well, it's really about a couple of privileged young ladies whose father dies, and they're left to run the ranch themselves. It's a lot of work, and they're adjusting to ranch life. They were both pretty much raised in boarding schools and barely know each other at the beginning, but by the end they're best friends. Just about two girls? And the veterinarian who helps out, and the ranch foreman. It's a good show. I promise. Frank wasn't going to argue with her. He didn't know anything about the show, so he really couldn't. All right. She jumped up, clearing their salad and soup bowls and coming back a minute later with the Swedish meatballs. These are pretty yummy. She put his in front of him and sat down again. Where'd you grow up? Around here? Frank shook his head. I'm actually a California transplant. I came here because I wanted out of the LA smog. After my time in the Air Force, I needed to be somewhere that wasn't too cluttered, if that makes sense. It does. And how do you like Idaho? Will you stay here? Oh yeah. This is home now. I can't imagine going back. She frowned. No family? I have a sister who still lives in LA. My parents both passed. I'm sorry to hear that. Thanks. He took a bite of the meatballs, pleasantly surprised. He wasn't sure why he'd been so sure she wouldn't be able to cook. Her daughter was an absolute baking marvel. What about you? Are you from around here? She shook her head. I grew up in Kansas. As you know, my husband was in the military, and we were in Idaho when he died. I didn't have the heart to try to move two kids, so I stayed. I've grown to love it here. I can see that. It's a pretty special state. He leaned back in his chair and patted his stomach. You can really cook. She smiled. You didn't think I could? Well, for some reason, I didn't. I know Miranda bakes like nobody's business, but I had in my head that you wouldn't be able to cook. I'm pleasantly surprised to learn I was wrong. Debbie laughed. I'm happy to prove you wrong. She stood up and carried the dishes into the kitchen, setting them in the sink to soak. I didn't have time to make dessert, but Miranda left a pie on my counter. Pie? Frank asked. What kind? I honestly have no idea. Shall we cut into it and find out? I'd love to. I'm mighty fond of Miranda's pies. She served them each a piece and carried them to the table. You want milk or coffee with it? Milk would be great. I don't know why, but I always want milk with baked goods. You're not the only one. She hurried to the kitchen and poured them each a tall glass of milk. Have you figured out what kind of pie yet? He shook his head. I was waiting for you to go first. Are you afraid of my daughter's pie? Debbie asked with a shocked look on her face. Frank shrugged. Not really. She's never disappointed me. I just thought you'd want to discover what flavor the pie was on your own. Debbie shook her head as she cut off a bite with her fork. Looks like berry. Huckleberry maybe? She ate the bite and nodded. Yup, huckleberry. Delicious, too. He dug in then, knowing he'd love it. As he watched her eat her pie, he knew that she was going to have to give in and date him. She was too special for him to give up. Asterisk. Lunch the following day was more hectic than it had been. Debbie and Frank had no firm plans to get together, but they met up at the cafe just the same. He walked in and saw where she was sitting, walking over to join her. Have you ordered yet? She nodded. I got us each the special. Did you ask what it is today? Nope. I decided to trust your taste and Bob's cooking. I hope I didn't make a mistake. Frank shook his head. Absolutely not. It's not possible to go wrong with Bob's cooking. Kelsey hurried over with drinks for them both and rushed off without a word. Debbie watched her go with an odd look. What's up with her? No idea. And I'm not going to try to guess. Kelsey scares me a little. Debbie grinned. Maybe she's nervous after watching Joanne have a baby last night. I could have done without the delivery room parts of the show. She shrugged. Real life is real life. I love how Dylan passed out in the delivery room. The actress who plays Joanne had her baby recently. A little boy. Is that why she had a boy in the show? I think so. I don't know if it will be her real kid on the show or not, but I think it's cool that they wrote her pregnancy in the way they did. Kelsey hurried over with 2 plates. Shepherd's pie today. You need anything else? Yeah, I need to know what you thought of Lazy Love last night. Fabulous, wasn't it? Debbie grinned at Kelsey, who turned a little green. It was good, but now I'm scared. I want my mother here before Esmeralda is born. Debbie didn't even blink at the new name. She was on to Kelsey's games now. She was going to change the name every day until the baby was born. Is she going to be? Only if she hurries. Kelsey turned and waddled away, going to sit with Shane. I thought that might be her problem. I hope Mrs. Weston does make it. Debbie shook her head. I'm not going to be a great mother substitute at this point. Frank shrugged. I think you'll do fine. She took a bite of her shepherd's pie and smiled. Yup. You're right. Bob never misses, does he? He doesn't. Frank took a sip of his water, watching her over the rim of his glass. Are we still on for sledding Saturday morning? Debbie nodded. She felt like they were spending a little too much time together, but at that moment, she didn't care. She was enjoying herself with a friend. What was wrong with that? Yeah. Did you find your toboggan? Yup. And my sled. We'll see who's faster. She rolled her eyes. Whatever. The next weekend is our annual snow sculpture contest. My team wins every year. Debbie raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Who's on your team? I don't know. Haven't put it together yet. Want to be on my team? She thought about it for a moment before shaking her head. I think I want to create a team of my own for the express purpose of beating you. The glint in her eye made Frank laugh. Oh yeah? You think you can beat me? Yup. She leaned back against the back of the booth, calling loudly, anyone want to be on my team when we upset Frank's team in the snow sculpture contest? Yes. Kelsey yelled back. You can't sculpt snow. You're pregnant. Shane said. Wanna bet? Kelsey sounded determined. I had to be careful at the beginning of my pregnancy, but Esmeralda's just about cooked. It would be fine if I went into labor at the snow sculpture contest. But your mom isn't supposed to be here until the day before. So? She'll be here the day before. That means I can go into labor anytime. Shane sighed. She keeps getting stuck when she wants to come home. The repairs on the Blizzard are just about done, and she's headed here. I'm sure it'll be fine. Whatever. Shane obviously disagreed with his wife. Debbie shook her head, her eyes meeting Frank's. I guess Kelsey's on my team. I guess she is. Frank ate his last bite. Tomorrow night's trivia night at the restaurant. Do you want to join me? I thought you weren't allowed to participate in trivia night anymore. Well, if you form the team, it should be fine. I'm just not allowed to be team captain anymore. She eyes him skeptically. Why? He shrugged. Top secret information. If I told you, I'd have to kill you. You can be a pain in my behind, Frank Watkins. Of course, I can. I wouldn't be worth anything if I couldn't. Asterisk. Frank walked her home after trivia night. They'd won hands down. How'd you know all those obscure facts about the Middle Ages? He asked. Debbie shrugged. I have a degree in early childhood education, but my minor was history. I loved the Middle Ages. Thought about writing a book set in 1066 at one point, but I could never get past the first chapter. It's a lot harder to write a book than you'd think. I've never tried. Frank looked over at her, wondering how she'd react if he tried to kiss her. They'd walked over together from her cabin, and his truck was parked there, so they had to walk back together. His feelings for her grew a little more every day. He'd never felt about a woman like he felt about her. Well, believe me when I say it's hard. I love that we have a writer who's connected to the ranch, though. I might pick her brain, just for fun. Maybe she can give me some pointers. Or I could give her my idea and have her write it. I've heard some writers do that. Frank shook his head. Not our Kaya. She says she has so many voices in her head that she'll never be able to write them all. She's not looking for others to give her ideas. Well, that's too bad, because my idea is sheer genius. She lifted her face up to catch a couple of snowflakes on her tongue. I love the snow. It's nice. The ranch makes it fun. We don't let anything slow us down. Good. I need to be in an area like this, where everything is focused on the outdoors. Can't wait to go sledding this weekend. And then kick your butt into next week in the snow sculpture contest. What are you going to make? She wagged her finger at him. I'm not giving intel to the enemy. Do I look like a spy to you? Who's on your team? Miranda, Kelsey, though I don't think she can do much, Kaya, and Bridget. We're going to have fun. Bridget will want you to make a huge pumpkin for Cinderella. She's a bit odd. Aren't we all? Debbie sighed contentedly. I can't believe I actually live here now. I loved visiting the ranch, but living somewhere like this is going to make me very happy. They got to her cabin, and she stomped the snow off her boots. Want to come in for some hot chocolate? I'd love that. She stripped off her winter gear and went straight to the kitchen, pouring some milk into a pan. She made hot chocolate the way her mother had, starting with cocoa powder. She didn't believe in doing the instant thing. Would you get a plate down and fill it with cookies from the jar? She asked. Frank immediately went to her cupboard to do as she asked. When did you have time to bake cookies? She grinned. I baked them last night. I couldn't stand only getting the ones from the bakery. I know they're made exactly the way I make cookies, because I taught Miranda, but it just doesn't feel right. He shook his head. How's the hiring coming? Really well. I have all the preschool teachers I need. Now I just need one teacher for school-age kids, and we're ready. We may be able to open a week early. Wade said he'd prefer it if we did. Wade's always in a hurry for everything. The Weston parents have been pretty rough on the kids, trying to get them to make the whole ranch perfect while they've been wandering around the U.S. in their RV. Debbie sighed. I heard something about that. I wonder what's going on with them. We won't know until they come back. They were really easy to work for when they were here, but they got really strange after they left. I wish we all had answers. She poured their hot chocolate into 2 mugs. I'll carry these over to the table if you'll grab the cookies. Frank picked up the plate and followed her. Tomorrow night is the amateur night at the restaurant. I'm judging again. I'm not singing. She yawned behind her hand. I think I'm going to stay in tomorrow night actually. It's been a busy week. I want to make some pillows for the baby room. Are you going to sew them yourself? Sure. It's the best way to keep the cost down. I've got my baby teacher all picked out, and we talked, and she wants to decorate the room in all Disney, so I ordered some Disney fabric, and it should arrive tomorrow. I'll get to work tomorrow night, and by Monday morning, we'll have pillows for the baby room. No big deal. What else are you doing this weekend? Well, I'm sledding with you on Saturday, and I'm doing church and lunch with Miranda and Bob on Sunday. Add in the sewing I'm doing, I've got a pretty full weekend. I still need to find a cook for the Kids Korral as well. I didn't think of that. Will you serve meals? We'll need to. We'll do breakfast, lunch, and dinner. When you're open that many hours, you need to do it all. I'm glad I pulled the day shift though. I'm not much on staying up that late. She bit her lip. Let me amend that. I can stay up that late, but I hate working that late. Frank bit into one of the chocolate chip cookies she'd made. These are just as good as Miranda's. Debbie shrugged. She makes kolaches better than me, but nothing else. She has to be better at something. Frank watched her for a moment, moving his hand to cover hers. I think you're pretty special, Debbie. She felt her heart skip a beat. He hadn't acted like he cared about her as anything more than a friend all week, and now this. I think you're special, too. She carefully pulled her hand away, taking another cookie. He took the hint and pulled away. He could wait. Lunch tomorrow? Debbie nodded. I'd love to. It's been nice having a friend to hang around with all week. Frank understood exactly what she was telling him. He was still friend-zoned, but that was okay. He was going to fight his way out of it. Maybe he'd visit Jacqueline. Surely, she'd have some good advice for him. I agree. Everyone else around here seems to be marrying off, so it's good to have someone to pal around with. He got to his feet. Thanks for the hot chocolate. You're welcome. She watched him, a little disappointed at his ready acceptance of her rejection. I'm going to head out. I'll see you at lunch. I'll order the specials for both of us. She smiled brightly, getting to her feet to walk him to the door. His eyes met hers once his coat was on, and for just a minute, she wanted him to kiss her. After he was gone and had shut the door behind him, she leaned back against it and breathed a sigh of relief. If he'd tried to kiss her then, she'd have let him, and where would that have left them? In a relationship. And she wasn't ready for that at all. At least she didn't think she was. Chapter 5. Frank had a solitary breakfast at the cafe the next morning, watching Kelsey as she waddled around. How are you feeling? He asked as she slid his eggs a la Bob in front of him. She smiled. Want the truth or the story I tell everyone else? He tilted his head to the side for a minute. I want the truth. I'm exhausted. My feet hurt. My legs hurt. I feel like someone is throwing rocks at me while I sleep. I have to pee every 3.2 seconds. But I'm happy. I'm about to have a baby, Frank. I'm glad you're happy. How's the sheriff doing with it all? Kelsey shrugged. If it wasn't for this top-secret investigation he has going on, I think he'd be slowly losing his mind. But he's staying busy. I wish he had a little more time at home, of course, because someone needs to rub my feet, gosh darn it. Frank laughed, a full belly laugh. You need to go see Maddie then. She'd take care of you. Maybe. Did you know that you have to be specially licensed to massage a pregnant woman? Kelsey shook her head with a sigh. It's like we're foreign creatures or something. Frank watched her walk away, shaking his head. Kelsey brought amusement to his life every day. As soon as he'd finished his breakfast, he paid Kelsey, then headed over toward the RV park. If anyone asked, he'd say he was going to the lake. What man in his 40s wanted to admit he was on his way to get advice on love from a woman who talked to fairies? When he was in sight of Jacqueline's house, she raised her hand in greeting. If it isn't Frank the Flyboy. Hi, Jacqueline. I know why you're here. You know the fairies tell me everything. She shook her head, glaring at him. Get inside, boy. You're wasting my time. Frank hadn't been called a boy in a long time, but he supposed that given Jacqueline's age, the title fit. Yes, ma'am. He hurried into the house, tucking a bunny under each arm as he sat in the visitor's chair. Why are you holding Romeo and Juliet? Those two are supposed to be kept away from each other. He frowned at her, concerned. They were both on the chair when I walked in. She sighed. Those two. Can't keep them apart in any life. He blinked a few times. She didn't really think these rabbits were the original Romeo and Juliet, did she? And weren't they just characters in a story anyway? What would you like me to do with them? Jacqueline frowned at him. You should take Juliet home with you. Then those star-crossed lovers will never cross paths again. At the look of utter shock on his face, she tilted her head back and laughed. Sorry. You really believed I thought they were Romeo and Juliet reincarnated, didn't you? You're crazier than I am. Frank put the bunnies onto the floor, feeling his face heating up. He was 48 years old. What was he doing blushing anyway? The fairies told you I was coming? Still chuckling, Jacqueline nodded to a teapot and a full plate of snickerdoodles. There were 2 small plates beside the larger one. Why do you think I went to all the trouble of fixing you a snack? Frank leaned forward and took a cookie, setting it on a plate. Thank you for the treat. So, from what I gather, you're madly in love with the director for the Kids Korral. You want to tell me why that's a bad thing? He sighed, his mouth full of cookie. He'd heard a lot about her snickerdoodles, but this was his first time to actually try them. She's not ready for a relationship. Her husband has been dead for 20 years, but she's afraid to get involved. Have you tried? Jacqueline asked, handing him a cup of tea. Tried what? To have a relationship with her. Have you kissed her? Or are you just sitting around with your finger up your nose, wearing one of your 3,000 ball caps? 783, he corrected without thinking. Excuse me? He choked a bit on his cookie, realizing that he'd corrected her. I only have 783 ball caps. Not 3,000. Jacqueline fixed him with a stare. Are you worried about getting the girl you love or about the exact number of ball caps you have? Are you daft, boy? No, ma'am. At least I don't think I am, but you're starting to really make me believe I must be. I'm not sure coming here was the best idea I've had. He put his teacup down and stood. Sit back down. Coming here was the only choice. When it's time for you to kiss her, you'll know. For now, you need to be her friend. The fairies tell me you're doing a fine job of being a friend. Don't kiss her until it's right. How will I know? Jacqueline gave a dramatic sigh. You'll know. You have kissed a girl before, haven't you, Flyboy? At my age, if I hadn't kissed a girl, there'd be something wrong with me. Maybe there is. There isn't. Yes, I've kissed a girl. Several, in fact. She studied him for a moment before nodding. After the babies are born, you're going to take me up in your helicopter. Babies? You mean after Kelsey and Belinda both have their babies? Jacqueline shrugged. That's the only information you're going to get from me. Have a good day. She plucked his plate from his hand and cleaned up the teapot and cups. Why are you still here? Frank shrugged, not really certain. Thanks for the advice. I don't give advice. I just pass on the words of the fairies. I don't need to give advice. Frank had no answer to that, so he quietly let himself out of her house. As soon as he'd closed the door, it was pulled open again. Aren't you going to thank the fairies for their wisdom? He looked at her for a moment, before nodding. Thank you for the wisdom, fairies. Jacqueline laughed heartily. The fairies aren't even listening. Do you know how daft you seem standing there talking to creatures who aren't there? Frank sighed, turning to walk away. Jacqueline was determined to get the best of him that day. And she had. Asterisk. When Frank arrived at Debbie's to pick her up on Saturday morning, she was ready for him. She was wearing snow boots, long johns, a pair of jeans, and several layers of cold weather gear. She had her scarf wrapped around her neck and her warm mittens covering her hands. She hurried out when she heard his truck, surprising him at the door. I have our snacks and our hot chocolate. Let's go then. I'm really excited. Even the kids wouldn't sled with me. They always wanted to ski. I feel so much safer on a sled, though. How are you in a helicopter? He asked. She shrugged. No idea. Why? Just curious. I still want to take you up when we get a chance. We'll talk about it when it's time. She got into the passenger side of his truck, looking out at the softly falling snow. It's a perfect day for sledding, isn't it? Sure. Frank honestly hadn't been sledding in a very long time. He'd had to buy a toboggan and a sled for the outing, but he'd made sure to splash a little dirt on them to make them look used. He had no idea if it would fool her, but he sure hoped so. How many more teachers do you need? She grinned at him. All done with teachers. Now we just need a cook, and we're all set. Oh, that's wonderful. He drove toward his house and the incline behind it. He already had the sleds parked there waiting for them. Do you think you'll have trouble finding a cook? She shrugged. I have no idea. We can probably find one pretty easily, but I'm not sure if she'll be Bob approved. Who cares if she's Bob approved? No one listens to him anyway. As soon as the words were out of his mouth, he was afraid he'd offended her. I mean. She laughed. I know exactly what you mean. Bob's a mess. It's that simple. As soon as he parked the car, she jumped down from the truck, leaving the thermos and cookies inside. She was happy that he'd agreed to let her bring snacks. Frank led the way to the equipment he'd purchased, wondering if they looked as new as he thought they did, but if she realized, she didn't say anything. I guess we should go down a couple of times to get the feel of the hill before we start racing. Do we have to race? Can't we just have fun? He sighed. If you want to be boring about it, I guess. Debbie shook her head at him. I don't mind racing when it's something like snow sculpting, but if it involves any kind of danger, I think we should be slow and steady. There's no need to risk ourselves. Have you always been so safe and careful? No, I haven't. Being a single mother makes you realize that safety matters a lot. I was reckless right up until I got word that Dale was dead. Since then I've been careful to only drive the speed limit and never do anything even a little bit dangerous. Where would I have been if I'd broken my leg when I had a toddler and was pregnant with no help? Frank frowned at her. He hadn't considered how much responsibility she'd felt until just that moment. And now? She shrugged. After 20 years, it's ingrained. I'll keep playing it safe. Besides, I might be a grandmother soon. Is Miranda? Not that I know of. I'm not sure they'd tell me right away, either. I think they'd know I would be so excited I couldn't contain myself. Frank smiled at that, wondering what it would be like to have grown children who looked up to him. He'd always kind of felt that he'd missed out on the raising kids thing, but he'd love to inherit 2 grown ones. Not nearly as much work that way. Fine. Be safe. But I'm going as fast as I want. You don't have children to worry about. Debbie walked to the toboggan and sat down, wiggling a little to get the feel of it. Then she used her mittened hands to scoot the conveyance the few inches it needed to go forward before she let gravity take over. Halfway down, she let out a whoop of excitement. She hadn't sled in a long, long time. When she reached the bottom, she was still sitting upright, but her cheeks were bright red from the cold. The ride had been fast and furious, even if Frank thought it should be faster. He was entitled to his opinions. Frank reached the bottom shortly after she did. No fair taking off without me, he said with a frown. She rolled her eyes. We're not racing, remember? He grabbed the ropes from both the sled and the toboggan and started the long trek back up the hill. We need a ski lift to get them back up the hill. She laughed. Are you such an old man you can't pull a couple of sleds up a hill? I'll take mine. We don't want you to have a heart attack. He shook his head at her, even as she reached for the rope. I'm a gentleman. I could never let my girl drag her own toboggan up the hill. Too much work for your delicate hands. Debbie shook her head at him. You have a strange code of conduct, Frank. Thank you. Finally, they reached the top, both of them slightly out of breath. Want to trade this time? Nope. I'm content on the toboggan. You have to be content with your sled. Frank grinned. Let's face it. I'd be content with a piece of cardboard. I remember using cardboard for sledding more than once when I was a kid. He looked over at her, enthralled by the twinkle in her eye. She was truly enjoying herself. It was all he could do not to lean over and kiss her. As Frank's eyes locked onto hers, Debbie held her breath for a moment. She wanted him to kiss her more than she'd wanted anything for a long time. This gentle, sweet man who was doing everything he could to honor her wishes about being friends for a while was stealing her heart. She couldn't just tell him to kiss her though, could she? And how would she feel if he did? She tore her gaze from his, refusing to contemplate kissing him for another moment. Jamming her hands into the snow on either side of the toboggan, she pushed off, and went careening down the hill, laughing the whole while. As she reached the bottom, she realized that Frank had gotten there first, and he had a triumphant look on his face. It didn't matter though. They stopped to sip the hot chocolate and eat the cookies, joking the whole while. "Your hill is fun. We're going to have to do this again." He took a sip of the hot chocolate she poured into a styrofoam cup for him. "Only if you promise to bring your hot chocolate again. No one makes it quite like you do." She laughed. "I use the recipe my mother used when I was a kid, but with one small addition." "What?" He leaned forward, very curious about her secret. "I add milk chocolate chips. It makes it creamier. And Mom always added a huge scoop of marshmallow cream to the whole batch, so I do that too." He took another sip, nodding. "Well, it's the best hot chocolate I've ever had. I will let you make it for me every day for the rest of my life." At his words, she started visibly. "I don't know about that." Frank sighed. He wished he knew exactly what would work to get through to her. He'd thought for a moment at the top of the hill it was time to kiss her, but she'd pushed off before he had the chance. "I have a flight this afternoon," he told her. "A couple is leaving, and they don't want to have to drive back to town, so I'm flying them in." "Do you do that a lot?" Debbie asked, grateful for the change of topic. He shrugged. "Usually a few times a month, I'll have to fly into Lewiston or Boise to pick up guests who don't want to rent a car and drive. We've talked about having a shuttle at the area airports, but at this point, we're too far away for it to make sense." She downed the last of her hot chocolate and ate her last bite of cookie. "Are we going again?" He nodded. "Sure. Cafe stops serving lunch at 2, so we want to make sure we're back at the ranch by 1 or so. No one wants to get on Kelsey's bad side by getting there just before she closes up for the weekend. So the diner's not open on Sundays, right?" He shook his head. "Nope. It's hard to find food when they're closed." "Aren't there restaurants in Riston?" "Sure. But they're not the same. You really are a creature of habit, aren't you, Frank?" "Yup. Not even ashamed of it." He got out of the truck where they'd taken their break and headed back for the sleds. He wished he had the words he needed to convince her that dating him would be all right, but he didn't. She'd have to figure that out on her own. After several more trips down the hill, they decided to head back to the ranch. When they walked into the cafe, they were both dripping wet from the snow. Kelsey took one look at the two of them and made a beeline for them. "What have you two been doing? Rolling in the snow?" Debbie laughed. "Close enough. We were sledding." Kelsey grinned. "I love sledding. Shane won't let me go until little Willardita arrives, though." "Willardita? That name is the worst you've come up with, Kelsey. Widget is better than Willardita." Debbie shook her head at the soon-to-be mother. Kelsey sighed. "Pastor Kevin's been tracing the ranch's history, and it looks like it was initially settled by a brother and sister named Willard and Francine. I thought Francine would be a good name too, but Shane just keeps shooting them all down. Francine is better than Willardita. That's what I told him. We could call her Frankie, which is what my ancestor was called. Doesn't Frankie Clapper have a nice ring to it?" Frank grinned at Kelsey. "I'm all for it. I think Frankie is the perfect name for your little girl." Kelsey frowned at him. "You're Frank." She looked over at Shane and called, "I changed my mind. I don't want a Frankie." Shane was obviously distracted by some paperwork on the table in front of him. "Whatever you say, dear. I'm going to name the baby Widget." "No, you're not." Kelsey sighed. "I thought I had him when he wasn't listening." She shook her head, obviously annoyed with her husband's attentiveness. "2 specials and 2 waters? Sounds good." As she walked away, Debbie looked at Frank. Are we ever going to look at the menus? Why would we? Someone slid into the booth beside Debbie, and she turned, surprised to see Miranda. Hi there. What are you doing out of the bakery? She hugged her daughter quickly. I have a college student who helps out in the afternoons a couple of days per week and on Saturdays now. I have to go in and make sure everything is baked, but she takes care of the customers as soon as it's open. Why didn't you want to spend the day with your mother then? Miranda shrugged. I figured you'd be spending the day with Frank. Rumor around the ranch has it that the two of you are always together. Debbie felt her face heat up and wanted to kick herself for it. The blush was as good as an admission of guilt. We're just having fun together. I need a friend on the ranch. I'm not accusing you of anything. What did you guys do today? You're soaking wet. We went sledding. Debbie knew the excitement was obvious on her face. Miranda looked at Frank. Now she's going to like you more than Scott and me. We never wanted to sled with her. Frank leaned forward, lowering his voice as if to impart a great secret. She's too scared to sled. She rides a toboggan. Really, Mom? Debbie shrugged. I have to be in one piece. You kids don't want to be left orphans, do you? You're not going to die sledding. Miranda shook her head. She used to say she'd die from skiing too. It's possible. I've seen the movie Other Side of the Mountain. Miranda patted her mother's arm, looking over at Kelsey. I want a special. Gotcha. Kelsey called back. What do you think of the name Willardita? I think it's the worst name in the entire history of bad names. You can't do that to your unborn child. Okay. Just checking. Kelsey went about her business as Miranda turned back to her mother and Frank. What are you two doing this afternoon? Miranda asked. I have a couple to fly to Lewiston, Frank told her. I would love a co-pilot, but your mom said something about working. She would. Miranda shook her head. For the past 20 years, she's done nothing that wasn't work or for us kids. Nothing. I want to see her go do something fun. I went sledding this morning. That was fun. Debbie hated that Miranda was making her sound like a fuddy-duddy. Then she realized that only a fuddy-duddy would even think the term fuddy-duddy. She might as well give in. Sure, Mom. What are you going to work on? I want to make pillows for the infant and toddler rooms. The fabric was delivered yesterday. You know how much I enjoy sewing. Do you want me to come over and help? What do you have planned? Debbie really didn't want to take Miranda away from her husband if they had a day together planned. Bob and I were talking about seeing a movie, but we can go another time. You spend the day with Bob. I'll make my pillows. We're already spending tomorrow together. A marriage is two people, and one of those is not your mother. Kelsey came from the kitchen with 3 plates, heaped with shrimp, rice, carrots, and biscuits. Debbie looked down at her plate with a frown. Why is there meat in my rice? It's dirty rice, Kelsey responded quickly. It's one of Bob's specialties. He lived in Louisiana for a long time. I guess I'm having dirty rice for lunch then. Kelsey pulled a small green container from her pocket, leaving it on the table. Just in case it's not spicy enough. She walked away, patting her belly as she went. Debbie took a bite and immediately reached for her water. Not spicy enough? Kelsey's taste buds are broken, Frank said, waving a hand in front of his mouth. Bob's food is delicious, though. Spicy, but good. I can't deny that. Debbie finished her water and smiled as Kelsey arrived with a pitcher of ice water to refill their glasses at the same time. You read my mind. No one around here can handle spice. Kelsey was mumbling under her breath as she walked away.